The girl on the cold platform, in the middle of a noisy alien market, under a large metal roof, strange creatures shouted and traded things. There were cages, glass boxes, and dirty platforms. One platform, cold and silver, held a small alien girl. She had no clothes, only cuts and bruises on her skin. Her body was thin like she hadn't eaten in days. She didn't cry, she didn't move much. She just stared at the floor with empty eyes. Aliens walked past her. Some laughed, some said, "She's too weak." Others looked once and walked away, without a word. One seller shouted, "Buy this one, only 1 credit, or take her for free." But no one stopped. The girl didn't understand why she was still alive. Days had passed. She had no name anymore. No family. She had once tried to speak, to beg, but they hit her when she spoke. So now, she stayed quiet. The cold metal under her made her shiver, but she didn't have the strength to move. Then, one day, someone different came to the market. He was human. He wore strong black boots, a jacket with many pockets, and a small device on his wrist. His face looked calm, but his eyes were sharp. He walked slowly, looking at everything. He didn't look like the other buyers. He looked like he didn't belong here. He wasn't planning to buy anything. He had landed on the wrong station. He was just walking through, trying to find his way back, but then his eyes saw her. He stopped. The girl didn't notice him at first. She kept her head low. But then she felt it. Someone was watching her, not with disgust or hate, but with something softer. She slowly lifted her head. Their eyes met. His heart hurt. She looked so broken, like she had been thrown away by the universe. He stepped closer. The seller laughed. "You want her, human? She's trash. Can't even speak. Been here for 7 days. Not even good for slave work." The human didn't answer. He looked down at the girl. She was shaking. Her eyes were wide now, like she didn't believe what was happening. He could see old burn marks on her arms. She looked afraid, but also confused. Why was he still standing there? He took off his coat. Slowly, without rushing, he leaned down and gently placed it over her shoulders. The girl's body tensed up. No one had ever done that before. She waited for pain. But it didn't come. The human said softly, "You're cold." The seller rolled his eyes. "If you really want her, take her. She's free. Just take her off my platform." The human picked her up carefully. She was so light, too light, her skin felt like paper. She made a small sound, almost a whisper, but didn't fight him. She couldn't. She didn't understand what was happening. Why wasn't he hurting her? Why was he holding her like she was something precious? He walked away with her in his arms. Some aliens watched and laughed. Others didn't care. She wasn't important to them. Just another forgotten girl. But to the human, something had changed. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from, but he knew one thing. No one deserved to be treated like garbage. No one deserved to be left on a cold platform without clothes, food, or hope. As he carried her back to his ship, she tried to look at his face. Her vision was blurry. Her lips were dry. But her heart felt something strange. Something she had not felt in a long time. Safety. When they reached his ship, he laid her on a soft bed. He didn't ask anything. He just placed a blanket over her, brought her water, and sat nearby in silence. The girl didn't drink at first. She didn't trust anything. But then she looked at his face again. He didn't look angry. He didn't look like a master. He looked kind. So slowly, she reached for the cup and drank. She didn't know if this was real or another trick. But, for now, she was warm. She was not on the cold platform anymore, and for the first time in many days, she closed her eyes and slept. The human steps forward. The girl woke up slowly. Her body ached, and her mind was full of fear, but something felt different. She was not on the cold platform anymore. There was warmth under her. A soft blanket covered her. and there was no noise of shouting traitors or laughing aliens. Just silence. Safe silence. She looked around the small room. The walls were smooth and clean. The air smelled fresh. A strange object on the wall made a soft humming sound. Her heart beat faster. Where was she? Had she been sold again? Was this just another place to suffer? Then the door opened. The human stepped inside, holding a bowl. His eyes met hers. He didn't smile, but his face was calm. He placed the bowl on a table nearby and stepped back. The smell of warm food filled the room. The girl stared at it, unsure. Was it poisoned? Was it a test? She waited. He sat down across the room, not saying anything. He didn't move closer. He didn't force her. He just waited. Minutes passed. Her stomach growled. She reached out slowly, shaking, and touched the bowl. When nothing happened, she brought it closer and took a bite. The taste made her eyes water, not because it was bad, but because it reminded her that she was still alive. The human spoke for the first time. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." She stopped chewing. No one had ever said those words to her. "I'm not going to sell you," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm not like them." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice had been silent for too long. He looked down, then said, "You don't have to speak now. Just rest. You need time." That night, she didn't sleep much. Her body kept expecting pain. Every time the ship made a sound, she flinched. But nothing bad happened. The man didn't touch her. He didn't even come close after giving her food and water. He let her sit alone. He treated her like a person. The next day, he brought her clean clothes. She didn't know how to wear them at first. Her hands shook, and she was afraid of doing something wrong. But when she stepped out wearing them, he nodded once and said, "Good." That one word made her chest feel strange, tight, but warm. She followed him silently through the ship. It wasn't big, but it was clean and peaceful. He showed her the bathroom, the kitchen, and the seat near the window. Through the glass, she saw stars, real stars. She had forgotten how beautiful they looked. Days passed. She didn't speak. But she started to trust the silence. One morning she surprised herself. She said a word. "Why?" The human turned. "Why what?" She lowered her eyes. "Why, help me." He sat down slowly. His answer was simple. "Because no one else did." She looked up, confused. "But I was nothing." He shook his head. "You're not nothing. They just made you believe that." She stared at him for a long time, then looked away. Her heart was not ready to believe it, but part of her wanted to. She still didn't know his name, and he didn't ask for hers. But something unspoken grew between them, a quiet understanding. One night she had a nightmare. She woke up gasping, eyes wide, breath fast. The door was open and the human stood there holding a glass of water. He didn't ask what she saw in her dream. He didn't tell her to stop crying. He just placed the glass near her and left. That was the moment she knew this human was different. He didn't want control. He didn't want power. He just wanted her to heal. She didn't know how to heal. But maybe, just maybe, he could teach her. And maybe, just maybe, she would one day remember who she really was. First words, first meal. The quiet between them had become a language of its own. No shouting, no commands, just small, gentle actions that slowly stitched the broken pieces of her together. She still kept her distance, but her eyes followed him more now. Each time he brought her food, she accepted it without hesitation. Each time he walked by, she no longer flinched. Then came the morning everything changed. The ship's soft hum filled the air as usual, and the smell of warm food drifted into the room. She was already awake, sitting up, her eyes alert but calm. When he entered and placed the meal near her, she didn't wait for him to leave this time. Instead, she asked, "What is this called?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. and her words were slow and careful, like each one carried weight. He paused. It was the first time she had spoken more than one word. He looked at her but didn't show surprise. He answered simply, "Stew, made from protein root and dried grain." She nodded and repeated softly, "Stew." That was the beginning. That day she ate all of it. Every bite. Her hands no longer shook. Her eyes stayed up. Something in her face had changed. A tiny spark of curiosity, of trust, maybe even strength. He noticed but said nothing. He allowed her to feel it on her own. Later she sat at the small window near the ship's edge. Outside, stars passed in slow lines as they traveled through space. Her eyes stayed on them for a long time. Then she said, without turning her head, "I used to look at the sky when I was little. I thought stars could talk." He didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "I don't remember where I came from," she continued. "Only pieces. A soft voice, a red wall, a song." He didn't ask questions, he just replied, "Sometimes pieces are enough." She turned slightly to look at him. "What do I call you?" He answered, "My name is Jalen." "Jalen," she repeated as if testing the sound. "And you?" he asked. She hesitated, then quietly said, "Sira. I think my name was Sira." "Then that's your name," he said gently. That night, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just the girl who had been left on a metal platform anymore. She was Sira now. She had a name again. She had spoken. She had eaten. She had remembered a piece of her story. The next morning, she was the one who walked toward him. She held the empty bowl in her hands and offered it to him. He took it without a word. Then she asked, "Can I help?" He raised an eyebrow. "With what?" "Anything," she said. "I want to move. I want to do something." He thought for a moment, then handed her a small cloth. "You can wipe the tools." She took it carefully, almost like it was something precious. And for the next hour, she sat beside him, wiping metal parts while he worked. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them had changed. It wasn't fear anymore, it was peace. Her body was still weak, but it was healing. Her mind still held shadows, but now there was light too. Each small action, each word, each bite, each step was building her back up. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't ask. For the first time in her life, the journey didn't scare her, because she wasn't alone anymore. She was with someone who saw her as a person, not a thing. And that made all the difference. Scars and Secret Sira had started to laugh, not often and not loudly, but every now and then, a soft sound would slip from her lips, quick and unsure, like she was still learning what laughter felt like. It surprised her just as much as it surprised Jalen. She'd sit beside him as he worked, wiping tools or watching stars pass outside the ship, and some small comment or movement would make her smile. It wasn't forced. It just happened. But even as her days became gentler, the night still held shadows. Dreams pulled her back into the past. She never spoke of them. Yet sometimes, in the early hours, she'd be sitting quietly with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Jalen never asked. He simply sat nearby and waited for morning. One day, while helping him sort through storage bins, she reached too far and lost her balance. Her sleeve slipped, revealing a part of her arm she always kept hidden. Jalen saw it, a series of deep, faded burn marks, not just random wounds, but shaped like letters or numbers. Sira froze. Her hand shot out to pull the sleeve back down. She didn't meet his eyes. Her breathing grew faster, like she expected anger, shame, or questions, but none came. Instead, he said softly, "You don't have to cover them here." She kept her head low. "They're ugly. They're yours," he said, "and they're not your fault." Her lips trembled, but no words came. She stood up and left the room. Not in anger, not in fear, just needing space. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't speak. The silence returned, but it was different now. He knew she was thinking. The next morning, she came to him. She didn't say anything right away. She just sat near the engine and waited for the right moment. Then, in a quiet voice, she began. They took me when I was small. I don't remember who gave me away. Maybe they sold me. Maybe I was lost. Doesn't matter now. Her voice was flat, like she'd told herself the story so many times that it no longer hurt on the surface. They moved me between ships, different traders, different cages. Some tried to train me, but I didn't learn fast, so they marked me. Every time I made a mistake, I got another burn. She touched her arm, not with fear this time, but like she was showing the truth of herself. I stopped trying to please them. I stopped trying to speak. I stopped trying to survive. Jalen didn't interrupt. He listened and only listened. I was left in that market because I was too quiet, too thin, too damaged. No one wanted me. She looked up at him, eyes steady. Now, no one except you. He met her gaze. I didn't take you out of pity. I know, she said. That's why it matters. From that day, she stopped hiding her arms. The marks were still there, but she didn't shrink from them. She wore short sleeves when she worked. She moved with more purpose. Her voice became steadier, and sometimes she even started conversations on her own. The ship had never been filled with much noise, but now it felt like something more, something alive. Not just because of the engines or the lights, but because two people inside it were building something quiet and strong. Sierra still had pain inside her. Some days were harder than others. But she had learned something important. She was more than what had been done to her, and Jalen, without ever trying to fix her, had helped her see it. She tries to walk again. The change began not in her body, but in her mind. Sierra no longer looked at the floor when she spoke. Her voice, once a soft whisper, now carried weight. She asked questions. She gave answers. She even teased Jalen once. And though her face turned red after, he had only smiled. It felt like a quiet victory. But her body still held the past tightly. The months, or maybe years of neglect had left her legs weak and her balance fragile. Walking without support was difficult, and she often chose to stay near walls or sit quietly instead of trying. One morning she stood by the ship's main corridor, staring at the length of it like it was a mountain. Her arms were crossed, her brows drawn together in thought. When Jalen walked past, she turned to him and said, I want to walk again. He didn't ask if she was sure. He simply nodded and said, Then we start today. He cleared a space in the corridor, removed any sharp tools or obstacles, and brought over a small support bar from the engine room. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She placed both hands on it and took one careful step. Her legs trembled. Her breath caught. She wobbled, then gripped the bar harder. Again, she said to herself. She took another step, and another. Then she fell. The impact wasn't hard, but it still shook her. For a moment she lay there, arms spread, eyes burning with frustration. Jalen took a step forward, ready to help, but she raised her hand. No, she said, struggling to sit up. Let me do it. It took a few tries, but she stood. She didn't cry. She didn't quit. That first day she made it 5 steps. The next day she made it 12. Then 15. Each movement hurt, but it also freed something inside her. Her body was remembering what her spirit had already begun to believe. She was not weak anymore. Jalen never clapped or cheered loudly. He offered no dramatic praise, but every time she finished, he gave her a small nod. The kind that told her she was seen, that he was proud, and that she didn't need applause to know her worth. One evening, after walking the full length of the corridor, she sat down beside him near the window. Outside, the stars glittered like a trail of dreams. She looked at her hands, then at him, and said, I never thought I'd want to live again. He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. His silence, his presence, his quiet strength, those things had been speaking to her since the beginning. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. The hum of the ship was steady like a heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Not because she was useful or owned, but simply because she existed, and that was enough. Others come looking peace had become part of Sierra's daily life. She moved through the ship with steady steps now, her balance stronger, her heart lighter. Her voice no longer trembled, and her eyes met Jalen's without fear. Each day added a layer to the person she was becoming. A person who laughed softly, who worked with purpose, who dreamed again. But peace, as she was learning, doesn't always last. It started with a signal. A strange alert blinked across the ship's control screen, an unidentified vessel requesting access. Jalen's calm face shifted slightly as he read the signal code. Sierra watched him from across the room. She didn't need to ask. She could feel it in the air. Something wasn't right. "They're from the station," Jalen finally said. "The market." Her chest tightened. "The traders?" He gave a short nod. "Looks like they tracked the ship." Sierra's fingers curled into fists. She had tried to forget that place, to bury the memory of the platform, the shouting, the hands that had hurt her. But now, the past had come knocking. "What do they want?" she asked, though deep down, she already knew. "They want you back," he said quietly. "They're claiming ownership." Sierra felt cold again, as if the air had changed. She stepped back, her body reacting before her mind could. But Jalen looked at her and spoke in a voice stronger than steel. "They don't get to claim you." She looked at him, searching for doubt, for hesitation, but there was none. He stood firm, already locking down the ship, already preparing to face whatever was coming. "They might fight," she said. "Then they'll lose," he replied. There was no fear in his words, no uncertainty. For the first time in her life, someone was standing up, not just beside her, but for her, and that gave her strength. The ship rocked slightly as the other vessel docked. Moments later, angry voices echoed through the comm system. Threats, demands, ugly words that made Sierra feel like nothing again. But Jalen stood at the front of the ship and replied calmly, "She's not yours. You gave her away." "She's property," the voice snarled. "No," Jalen said. "She's a person, and she's under my protection." The silence that followed was heavy. Sierra stepped forward then, her voice clear and sure. "You left me to die. You don't get to come back now." There was surprise on the other end. They hadn't expected her to speak. Jalen didn't stop her. She continued. "I remember everything. I remember the way you looked through me, like I was dirt, like I was a thing. But I'm not a thing. I'm Sierra, and I belong to no one." The connection cut. Seconds passed. Then lights on the control panel flickered red. "They're charging weapons," Jalen said. He moved fast, powering up the ship's shields and preparing to evade. But Sierra didn't step back this time. She stood beside him, watching the stars shift as the ship spun into motion. They didn't wait to be fired on. They moved first. Sharp turns, smart maneuvers, clean flying. Jalen had flown through worse before. But now he had a reason stronger than any mission. They escaped the encounter with skill, leaving the market ship behind, powerless and drifting. When it was over, and the stars became still again, Sierra finally sat down. Her hands were shaking, but her heart wasn't. She looked at Jalen and said, "I didn't think I could stand up to them." "You did more than stand," he replied. "You took your voice back." She nodded slowly. She knew the past would never disappear, but now it no longer controlled her. She had faced it, spoken against it, and walked away stronger. And this time, no one would take that from her. A new home, a new life. The stars outside looked different now, not because they had changed, but because Sierra had. Once, they had seemed far away and silent, watching her suffer with cold, distant light. But now, they felt closer, warmer. like they were no longer just lights in the dark, but a path forward. Days after the escape, Jalen guided the ship toward a quiet planet within human territory. It wasn't flashy or rich. No shining cities, no crowded ports. Just wide skies, fresh air, and soil that welcomed life. He said nothing when they landed. He didn't call it home. He simply opened the door and let her step out first. She walked slowly down the ramp, her bare feet touching warm ground. Grass brushed her skin. The wind played in her hair. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing it all in, unsure if it was real. But it was. She turned to look back at Jalen, who stood behind her waiting. "Why here?" she asked. He shrugged lightly. "Because it's quiet. Because no one here will ever try to own you." A soft smile touched her lips. In the days that followed, they built something simple. Not a fortress, not a palace. Just a small place with walls, a roof, and enough space to live freely. Sierra planted flowers by the door. She had never done that before. She didn't even know their names, but she liked the colors. She liked watching them grow. She took up small tasks, cleaning, organizing, learning how to cook real food. She even started reading, slowly sounding out the words from a book Jalen gave her. Some nights she'd sit near the window and read them aloud. He never corrected her, just listened, sometimes pretending to be busy while she practiced. They never talked about what label to give their bond. There were no words like rescuer or savior. It wasn't needed. What they shared wasn't built on duty. It was built on choice. Every day Sierra chose to wake up and smile. Every day Jalen chose to stay near. The scars on her body didn't fade, but they no longer hurt her. They were there, like old pages in a story she had outgrown. She didn't need to erase them. She just didn't let them define her anymore. One afternoon, as she stood outside watching the sun sink behind the hills, she whispered, "This is mine." The wind carried her words forward, and she meant every one of them. Not just the land, not just the house, but her life. It belonged to her now, and no one could take it back. Sierra was no longer the girl left on a cold platform, forgotten and unwanted. She was no longer silent, no longer afraid. She had found her voice, she had found her strength. And in a quiet place among the stars, she had found her freedom.